The grand chandelier glittered over the crowd, and the scent of fresh roses mixed with champagne. I smoothed the front of my navy silk gown, feeling the luxurious fabric hug me in all the right places. Maddie Brooks, 29, successful, polished, and quietly terrified. Not of the wedding, not of seeing my sister laugh with her new husband, but of the screen behind the stage. I tried to smile, pretending the buzzing in my chest was excitement, not anxiety. My phone vibrated in my clutch, a small distraction I welcomed. I glanced at the message. "Are you here already? Don't forget the family's gonna talk." I typed a quick reply, fingers brushing over my polished nails, trying to anchor myself in the moment. Then the screen flickered. I froze. Bold white letters against a black backdrop. Infertile, divorced, failure, high school. The air went out of my lungs. Laughter and music swirled around me, but in that split second, it felt like the world slowed to a cruel, mocking heartbeat. Old shame, humiliation, and bitter memories surged. High school whispers, family sighs, ex-boyfriend smirks, all amplified by that glaring reminder. But under it all, something steadied me. A quiet, simmering fire of survival. I straightened my shoulders. They could try to define me, but tonight, I would show them exactly who I had become. I was 16 when the world first decided I was a disappointment. High school hallways were brutal arenas, full of whispers that seemed louder than shouts. My parents never meant to be cruel, but their disappointment was a constant weight pressing down on my chest. "You're dreaming too small, Maddie," my mother said that night at the dinner table, pushing a half-eaten salad away. "You need to think about stability, not whatever these creative projects are." My father, silent as usual, nodded once. That single motion carried the force of a verdict. My hands shook as I lifted my fork. The lump in my throat made swallowing impossible. I wanted to argue, to scream, to tell them I could be more than their expectations. But I was small, quiet, invisible, and utterly alone in that dining room. Walking home later, the autumn wind tugged at my coat, sharp and cold. I pressed my grandmother's locket in my pocket, the one she had given me the summer before. "Maddie," she had whispered, "don't let anyone decide your worth. Not teachers, not boys, not even family. Only you." Her words had been a lifeline. That night, I sat on my bedroom floor, tracing the engraving inside the locket, and made a vow. I would leave the world's labels behind. I would work for myself, on my own terms. The next morning, I started small. Extra hours at the library, online courses, tutoring younger kids for extra cash. Every no I encountered, the teacher who said I wasn't ready, the classmates who mocked me, the family sighs that followed me down the hall, became fuel. By the time I graduated, I had made my first real step toward independence, a small scholarship, a rented apartment away from home, and a plan. A plan that no one had approved, no one had believed in, and no one could stop. I was no longer the timid girl who had trembled at every word of disapproval. I was beginning to carve out a life that was mine, and mine alone. College had been my proving ground, but life after graduation was the real battlefield. I rented a tiny apartment in Brooklyn, its peeling paint and creaky floorboards a far cry from my childhood home, but it was mine. Every morning, I brewed coffee, tucked my hair behind my ears, and reminded myself, this was the start of something I controlled entirely. I met Ms. Evelyn Grant at a networking event, a powerhouse in marketing, sharp as a tack, with an uncanny ability to see talent others overlooked. She didn't judge my past.
She didn't even ask.
She just looked at me and said, "You're capable of more than you know, Maddie. Don't let anyone define your story." I threw myself into my work. Late nights became routine. Crafting campaigns, pitching ideas, studying market trends. Every rejection from clients stung. Every missed opportunity felt like an echo of high school whispers. But each small victory, my first client signing a contract, my first freelance paycheck, my first campaign praised, built a quiet confidence that no one could see. I became a ghost of success to my family. They knew I was doing well, vaguely, but they didn't know how well. I posted modest updates on social media, a coffee shop photo, a blurry snapshot of my office. Behind closed doors, however, I was thriving. I had investors, contracts, and an emerging reputation as someone who could turn struggling brands into profit machines. Through it all, the locket my grandmother had given me stayed close to my heart. When self-doubt gnawed at me, I would press it, feeling the cold metal and remembering her words, "Only you define your worth." Even my friendships adapted to this rhythm. Some drifted away, intimidated or confused by my drive. Others became my chosen family, celebrating late-night victories and small milestones. Every step forward was deliberate, a testament to the girl who refused to be a failure. The turning point came when I finally secured a major client, one that put my business on the map and gave me financial independence I hadn't dared imagine in my teenage dreams. I rented a sleek loft downtown, decorated it with the art I loved, and surrounded myself with the tools of a life I had built from scratch. The reflection in the glass walls showed a woman I barely recognized, a woman who had been underestimated her entire life, and yet here she was, unstoppable. Through it all, I kept my success hidden from my family, not out of spite, but because I wanted it to be undeniable. I wanted them to see me not as a girl who had failed at love, fertility, or ambition, but as the woman who had rewritten her story entirely on her own terms. And tonight, at my sister's wedding, that hidden success would finally meet the spotlight. The music swelled as my sister, Claire, twirled across the dance floor in her ivory gown. Guests laughed and clinked glasses, but my eyes kept darting to the large screen above the stage, the one that had cruelly labeled me infertile,
Divorced.
failure. I swallowed, steadying the trembling in my fingers. Family eyes fell on me, scanning, waiting. They expected the same quiet, defeated girl who had been dismissed at every family gathering, the one who had struggled in high school and stumbled in love, the one who had failed by their definitions. I let them take it all in. My navy silk gown shimmered under the reception lights. My heels clicked confidently across the polished floor. Subtle touches of success were woven into my presence, the delicate, bespoke jewelry glinting at my wrists, the faint scent of expensive perfume that lingered in my wake. Even my posture, straight, deliberate, commanding, spoke volumes. Then I let the moment linger, savoring it. I knew they were waiting for a self-conscious smile or a nervous stumble. I gave them neither. Instead, I raised a glass and cleared my throat, letting the room hush, the air thick with anticipation. "Hello, everyone," I began, my voice calm, even warm. I imagine many of you saw the screen and thought it was accurate. A ripple passed through the crowd. I paused, letting my words sink in. But it's not even close. Eyes widened, jaws tightened, whispers started. I continued, "I am not the failure some of you hoped I'd remain. I am the founder and CEO of Brooks & Company.
Marketing.
My company has clients nationwide. I've achieved financial independence, a life I built from nothing, entirely on my own terms." "That locket," I said, lifting the delicate piece my grandmother had given me years ago, reminded me that only I define my worth. I watched disbelief ripple across their faces. My parents' expressions shifted, shock, guilt, a touch of shame. My sister's mouth fell open. Even distant relatives who hadn't spoken to me in years looked like they'd swallowed a bitter truth whole. I let them absorb the reality of my presence, my success, my story rewritten. "So," I said, smiling just slightly, "if you were expecting someone small, insecure, or defeated, I hope you understand that person no longer exists. What you see now is the result of hard work, resilience, and refusing to let past labels dictate my life." There was a moment of silence, then a slow, stunned nod from my father. My mother blinked rapidly, a tear glinting at the edge of her eye. Claire hesitated, then reached for my hand. Hesitation, apology, and all rolled into one. I felt the room shift, the energy bending in my favor, not through anger, but through undeniable truth. I had stood in their gaze and declared myself, a woman who had survived, grown, and thrived in spite of every whisper that had tried to diminish her. The screen behind me no longer mattered. I had turned its message into a reflection of what I had overcome, rather than a verdict on who I was. The room was quiet now, the energy tense but attentive. I could feel it. The old hierarchy of our family, expectations, judgments, dismissals had shifted. Tonight, I held the upper hand. Not out of malice, but because I had earned it, and because I was finally unafraid to assert myself. I turned to my parents first. "I love you," I said, my voice soft but firm. But love isn't enough to excuse patterns that hurt. If we're going to move forward, there are conditions. Their faces paled slightly, as though I had handed them a contract instead of words. "Mom, Dad, you need to respect boundaries. I will no longer be defined by your disappointment or comparison. You must acknowledge my choices, without judgment. No more sighs, no more whispers about failure or expectations." Their eyes flickered with guilt, but I continued, unwavering. "Claire, I adore you, but you've lived your life in the shadow of perfection, ours, society's, mine at times. Your dreams matter too. Start chasing them unapologetically. And to everyone else, toxicity will not be entertained. Old habits die tonight. We're growing, or we're standing aside." I watched them process, the tension in their shoulders, the cautious hope in their eyes. I wasn't punishing them. I was giving them a blueprint for redemption. Every demand I made was tied to healing, not humiliation. Then I added, with a hint of warmth, "I will support you, but on the terms of growth, respect, and authenticity. Anyone unwilling to meet that standard, I will love from a distance." A flicker of understanding passed through my mother's gaze. My father exhaled, realizing perhaps for the first time that their role was not to control me, but to witness my strength. Claire reached out, gripping my hand, tears streaming, a silent promise. She would try. I felt a rush of empowerment, but it was tempered with care. I wasn't seeking vengeance. I was asserting the life I had fought for. The power I held wasn't measured in money, titles, or status. It was in being unapologetically myself, demanding respect while offering love under clear, healthy terms. By the time the first course of dinner arrived, the energy in the room had softened. I could see subtle changes already. Small nods, sincere apologies, tentative smiles. The old hierarchy had shifted. I wasn't just Maddie Brooks, the girl once labeled a failure. I was Maddie Brooks, the woman who set the rules of engagement, who dictated the terms of her relationships, and who refused to be diminished again. Tonight, power was not a weapon. It was clarity, self-respect, and the courage to demand what was owed. Authenticity, love, and mutual growth. The reception continued around me, laughter and music flowing, but I felt a quiet calm settle over my chest. My family was talking, tentatively at first, but with genuine curiosity and effort. Claire had taken a deep breath and started sharing her own dreams aloud, something she rarely did in front of others. My parents lingered nearby, listening, nodding, even smiling in ways that felt cautious but real. I touched the locket at my collarbone, the one my grandmother had given me so many years ago. It had been my talisman through rejection, heartbreak, and endless self-doubt. Tonight, it reminded me not just of survival, but of the woman I had become. The one who could turn cruelty into fuel, whispers into determination, and judgment into clarity. I stepped aside for a moment, letting the room breathe, observing how small acts of change were already unfolding. A cousin who had mocked me in high school complimented my dress, eyes wide with sincerity. Even distant relatives whispered about my accomplishments, clearly reevaluating the narrative they had believed for years. For the first time, I realized that I had achieved something beyond wealth or career success. I had rewritten the emotional architecture of my family. The old labels, infertile, divorced, failure, no longer held power over me, and the people around me were learning that power worked differently now. It demanded respect, yes, but it also invited growth, understanding, and real connection. I took a slow breath and let a small smile curve my lips. I could feel the warmth of pride without the sting of arrogance, the satisfaction of victory without bitterness. I had endured pain, forged independence, and nurtured resilience, and now I could watch the people I loved begin to rise as well. The locket pressed lightly against my heart. I whispered to myself, almost inaudibly, "Only I define my worth." That truth, once fragile and whispered in solitude, had become a beacon, not just for me, but for everyone willing to meet it. As the night wore on, I moved back into the crowd, a woman fully present in her power, grace, and self-respect. I laughed with Claire, nodded at my parents, and let myself enjoy the reception, not as a shadow of high school, not as a failure, but as Maddie Brooks, the woman who had turned a cruel label into a story of triumph. And as the music swelled and the lights shimmered around me, I knew, finally, that the world saw what mattered most: strength, independence, and the quiet, unstoppable glow of a woman who refused to be diminished again.